Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of The Founder Files. Today I'm chatting with Sam Hutchinson, the co-founder and CEO of Sendmarc. Sendmarc is a cybersecurity company that has thousands of clients, hundreds of partners, and has permanent people on every continent in the world except for Asia, and Antarctica of course. Speaking about Sam, he's an entrepreneur and he's been one since 16. He successfully exited Everlytic, an email marketing company, before starting Sendmarc, and has experience and knowledge there that really gave the platform to turn Sendmarc into what it is today in less than 5 years. So speaking to that, Sam is radically honest about how they started off the journey and how they originally wanted a small business to have fun with before it became a bucking bronco and took off, because he exited a business successfully and didn't necessarily need to start one. But the idea obviously grabbed him, and you know how us founders are. But then he also gets into the detail of how the opportunity came to exist in the first place and how their founding story is a true example of where opportunity and preparation meet. He talks about hiring a sales leader, who's now their CRO, from the early days and how he built up the sales function of the business. Sam shares his honest accounts of growing internationally and how they had to take different approaches in the US versus Europe and how they're still trying to get it right. We spent some time talking about partnerships, how he targeted the right partners, and how he's still learning today about his channel and distribution partners and growing that aspect of his business. And as always, much, much more in between. Now, if you aren't already following the Founder Files, then you're probably going to miss candid conversations with founders like Sam, where you can learn how to build out your sales team or not make the same mistakes when growing internationally. So make sure that you're following us on social media and your preferred podcast platform so you don't miss any more valuable insights from experienced and successful founders. But without further ado, let's get into the authentic details of scaling a cybersecurity company from South Africa into the rest of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Sam Hutchinson. Welcome to The Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coots, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between. Hey Sam, welcome to the Founder Files. It's great to have you here. Obviously being introduced through Clive, can't wait to see the other end of the story. Got the VC side, love seeing the tech founder side. So welcome to the podcast, and I can't wait to learn more about, email tech.
Yeah, thanks, Cameron. Really appreciate your time. And yeah, it's nice that you were introduced to me via Clive. Callan was one of our first investors, and he's a good human. I have a lot of time and respect for him. I'm not going to say that email's super exciting or anything like that, but it's what we do every day, and we solve a real problem. And when we solve real problems, that's good fun in general. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and great to have you here. So obviously, on the topic of solving real problems, you've been doing this since you were 16 as an entrepreneur, but I think this will be a bit more relevant to your context and the founding story. But I think before we get into the whole conversation, email is what you do on a daily basis. Just explain Sendmarc as a business and how the business model works, please.
Yeah, I think a good place to explain it is maybe like the problem that we solve. Because if we're not solving a real problem that's relevant to everybody, then there's no reason for us to exist. So the truth is we work in an incredibly boring space, which is something called email. But every single organization in the world uses mail, right? And it's a fairly neglected sort of tech because it's been around for so long. You never hear about engineers saying that I want to work in email. They all want to work in AI or blockchain or those types of areas. So I feel that mail's been actually slightly neglected, yet it's a communication platform that every company in the world uses. So think about that. That's like an unlimited market, right? But there's a fundamental security problem with mail. And that problem is that right now, a cyber criminal can send an email from just about anybody in the world. So Cameron, I'm sorry to pick on you, but I can actually send a mail from you. Same as I can send an email from just about most of large corporations in South Africa or various government institutions all over the world. And this problem that I'm describing is called impersonation and spoofing, right? Every single email domain in the world suffers from that security flaw. Our goal at Sendmarc is to globally stop impersonation and spoofing. We want to make it impossible for a cyber criminal to send an email from anybody, right? And make sure that only organizations can send mail from themselves. Does that kind of make sense, or should I go through a use case or an example or something like that?
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think so many people have been victims of that kind of fraud, either in terms of receiving an email that seems quite fishy, pun intended, or
Yeah,
if it's the other way around in terms of someone's actually hacked their own domains. It's happened to clients of mine. It's a very real problem out there. So I guess the next
yeah.
question follow up to that is, how do you go about solving that problem, and how did you monetize that as a business?
Because email is an open standard, right? Nobody owns email. It's part of the web almost. If you want to get certain sort of security standards integrated in email, every organization has to adhere to them, right? So there's a global security standard, which is something called DMARC. And if an organization implements this global security standard called DMARC, they can globally stop impersonation and spoofing on their domain. And they can protect their customers, their suppliers, their shareholders. Every mailbox in the world will be protected. The problem with DMARC is it's fairly complex to implement, and requires certain sort of data analytics. And through complexity, opportunity is created. So we help organizations implement DMARC. I like to think a good sort of metaphor would be, imagine how you have SSL for the internet, for the web, or something like that. It's not an exact parallel, but DMARC is something similar for email. Every organization in the world is going to have to implement DMARC on their mail over the next 5 to 10 years, right? And we help organizations get that right and at scale. That's what we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And chat me through the business model. I mean, obviously, I looked through your website. You've got these tiered subscription models. Talk to me about it. So you mentioned the value prop there, essentially protecting spoofing and fraudulent email. There was a specific word you used that's now just escaping me. But impersonation. So you've got these tiered models, subscription, typical. We talk usually software as a service, but this sounds like almost the way you explain it is service as a service. So it sounds like a service-based business. But explain to me how it actually works.
We do have 2 tiers. So for top-end sort of enterprise customers, we have a whole professional services team that'll help them implement DMARC. But for anybody else, they just purchase our platform. So for example, we have hundreds of MSPs who manage their customers, and MSPs are using our platform to help them implement DMARC for their customers. There's a large data analytics component to implementing DMARC, and you need some sort of platform to implement or manage that sort of data. And we provide that data analytics and policy management platform for customers and MSPs. But because of its complexity, we can also ship our professional services team to you. I'd say only about 8% of our customers use our professional services. So as much as you say it's a services business, it's very much more a SaaS business. Yeah, we sell a product, and it has some sort of subscription service, and yeah, that's how it all works, right? I mean, hopefully that's what we do as a business, but there's so much more fun things to talk about. So where do you want to take this conversation? I mean, what we do as a company is one thing, but I think what I'm proud of is how we do it, right? How we run this business, how did we scale? That's a much more fun topic to talk about. But tell me where you want to take this, Cameron.
No, of course. I mean, I think the first point is, where's the business at now? I mean, you're sitting at about 70 people. You've got like a presence all over the world. Just so the audience can understand what you've really been able to take, as you claim it, such a boring business in what you do, but so critical for the world. And I mean, you got it to this point. So where's the business at now?
Yeah, so we're about 4.5 years old. We have many thousands of customers on every continent, in every time zone. We have 70 employees, people on the ground in Australia, Amsterdam, South Africa, North America, South America. We have hundreds of partners, many distribution networks. Yeah, it's grown a lot. I think much faster than I was expecting in the early days of our business. I think when we started this company with the other 2 co-founders, I remember us sitting at a coffee shop going, if we can just have like 10 or 12 employees, we'll be happy. Maybe we can have 100 or 200 customers. You know, we can just have a peaceful life. And now we have many thousands of customers. And I never thought we'd get here, to be honest. There's a time when a business starts to have a life of its own. And you have to look yourself in the mirror and go, I'm going to cut this thing's legs off right now because I don't think I want to ride it. Or you decide you're going to jump on that saddle and ride it like crazy, and also be comfortable with falling off. And we're definitely in the phase of riding that bucking bronco horse at the moment. So it's pretty wild. And then sometimes we fall off, but we just get back up and jump back on the saddle. Pretty wild, eh? Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like an epic place to be. I mean, let's go a couple steps back. I mean, you mentioned the fact that you're in a coffee shop with your co-founders. Talk to me about the founding story. But let's almost even contextualize that, because when we were, aligning on the podcast before we actually started hitting record, I mean, you didn't actually need to start a business, but as being an entrepreneur, you formulated an idea, the bug bites, and you just can't go away. So talk to me about how you started Sendmarc in the first place.
Yeah, the truth is that I didn't start Sendmarc. Sendmarc was started by one of my other co-founders, Keith Thompson. So he started the business, even though it was a collective idea through a whole bunch of journeys and discussions. And he was at a phase in his life where he was happy to take a risk. But I decided to stay on in my previous business, right? I'd sold my previous company and I was in earnout. And I never thought I would start another company or another business or anything like that. But in my last year of earnout, I realized it was time for me to leave. And I left that business. And I spoke to Keith and I said, hey, can I join you on this thing? Even though, because it was an idea that we formulated together, but he was the guy that took that initial risk and decided to go build it himself. So I joined him straight away. And within 3 months, because I understood this business very well, within 3 months, we'd raised our first round of funding. We started hiring employees. That was kind of where it started. I mean, if he had to describe me, he'd probably say this is collectively both of our ideas, and it is collectively both of our ideas. But he was the guy that resigned first and went and sat in a garage or his tiny bedroom and started coding the thing, right? If that makes sense. And to be honest, when I sold my previous business, there wasn't a necessity to go and work again. But there's something weird which happens when you want to start a company. It's almost like you can't not do it. The ideas are sometimes too good. Well, you believe they're good. Mostly they're stupid, but entrepreneurs are a bit delusional. They're too good to just keep going, right? So yeah, we had to keep going. Does that help answer the question? Was it a bit vague?
No, of course. I just want to narrow down on the idea first and foremost, and the reason why is, again, from when we were speaking offline, is that it's a need that every single company in the world has, right? Everyone uses mail, right? Everyone is going to need some form of mail security at some point of inevitability. As long as those businesses keep growing, then, and even if they're not growing, everyone's at risk of it. And every established business, every mature business needs to do this. Otherwise, this is just risk that you are bringing on board. And the point that you were saying is it's also it's not sexy, but it's necessary. And there's so many people that do this. And there's, as you say, DMARC is just this standard of security protocol and a certain way of doing it. So all of this is there. And there's 10 other businesses, you said, that look exactly like you, that do the exact same thing. So what you're describing, it's naturally one of those things when there's such a massive need, right? It's just the competitive landscape is an absolute bloodbath, and everything is what's the point of even entering this, where everyone's kind of competing and moving around, and it's just something that's so accessible. The way that I would almost equate this is to someone trying to start another grocery store out of nowhere. It's like there are so many people that it's like this is fulfilling such a massive and broad need with so many established players. Why even enter this market in the first place? So I think I want to contextualize that thinking and go back to the idea. And it's what was the idea that wasn't already being fulfilled by the market?
Well, the truth is that we were actually pretty early starters. So we were one of the first 5 or 6 companies in the world to take the standard, which was starting to emerge, right? So we were actually hearing about DMARC and all of that sort of stuff. And we looked at the competitive landscape and it was pretty low. And we analyzed global competition, and penetration globally was only at 10%. So only 10% of Fortune 500 companies in the world had implemented this global standard. And we could see that everybody was going to have to do that over time. So I think we were some of the early entrants. But let's maybe talk about what you're saying. It's sometimes people are afraid of the competition. And I think in a weird way, you should be afraid if there's no competition. Mm-hmm. Because if you have no competition, it means your idea is pretty bad. I mean, it's just it's unusual for anybody in the world to be the first to think of something, right? It's incredibly unusual. So I think we were pretty grateful that there was competition. There were people out there that had proven our business could exist and work. The other thing about ideas is sometimes people ask me, where did the idea come from? And there was no single moment where the idea emerged. Like a lot about businesses is like you fall into a sequence of events which create an opportunity. And that's what happened with us. We started fiddling with something and then developing something. I'll tell you an interesting story. The first time I tried to sell this, right? So because of my previous position in my previous company, I knew a lot of CIOs. So I phoned a CIO at one of South Africa's largest financial organizations. And I asked him if I could come and pitch this product to him. So he said, yeah, no problem. So I got on an airplane, and on the plane, I photoshopped a fake product. And I put together a PowerPoint presentation of a product which did not exist, right? And I went and sat in that boardroom and I pitched this thing as if it existed. And 2 weeks later, that financial organization chose one of my competitors, right? They didn't choose me, and they decided not to do business with me. They never knew that I was totally like faking it in that boardroom, right? And that was a super cool moment for me because what it told me is that companies were going to spend money with somebody to solve the problem I was trying to solve. It actually didn't matter to me in that moment that they weren't going to pay me. It mattered that they were going to pay somebody, right? So the math starts going on in my head. If I can just convince 1 in 10 people that I meet to spend money with me, we got a kick-ass business here, right? So I tell that story because that was one of the 50 things which happened in our journey, which was a validation, right? About this can work, this can happen, and all of those sorts of things. The idea emerged over a couple of months, even a year, right? Seeing what would go on. Yeah. I feel like I digressed a bit there. Yeah.
No, that's perfectly fine. I just love that context in terms of starting off, because this was your one, being an entrepreneur, and just I guess just selling what you can, but at the same time it's it's a real test of the market, test of if there is a need that people here are willing to pay for. Because my initial reaction to that is like, oh damn, okay, you lost that deal, and you were like, no, this is a great sign. Because this doesn't actually exist, and we weren't necessarily going to build it after the fact, but the point is this, they're willing to pay for. But this is also where my curiosity is kicking, because I'm just really trying to understand the market here, because my assumption was that the way that you spoke about it with the standard of DMARC, it's been around for ages, but it's a relatively novel thing. So this brings two questions into my mind. One is, what have companies been doing before that? What have they always been doing to try and protect themselves from impersonation and spoofing? And even after that, now, is from a sales perspective, is this sounds quite tricky, because I need to almost educate my customer on what DMARC is in order before I get them to buy. And so just talk me through those 2 points of what was the market already doing, and how have you had to potentially shift that with DMARC and educating them that this is what they need.
Right, so let's just paint a quick picture of email security, right? So the traditional email security has been, let's say an attacker sends a mail to your company. So let's say I'm company ABC, and attackers are sending mail to my organization. I generally have some sort of anti-spam service or perimeter security that's stopping that mail coming into my organization. And there are tens of thousands of organizations like that. So even Microsoft has a product that does that. Google has a product that does that. They're stopping all the bad stuff coming into your company. That problem has been quite well solved and is fairly well understood. The problem that we solve, what happens when a cyber criminal is sending a fake mail to somebody outside of your company? Your customer, your suppliers, your shareholders. So you may not know, but in the past we used to get lots of fake mail from SARS, South African Revenue Service, right? Or ABSA. Or Standard Bank, or those types of companies. You don't get.
It still happens. I mean, if it's not emails, it's SMSs. And I think the point now, it's like, because
you don't get fake mails from SARS.
Yeah,
and it's not that. It's actually SARS saw that DMARC was important to implement, and now you don't get fake mail from SARS. You get fake SMSs, but not fake mail.
Yes.
And it's interesting about people noticed when it was happening, but they haven't noticed now that it's not happening. super interesting thing. Yeah. So
100%.
that's the second phase of email security. It's like we can protect our company, but how do we protect the rest of the world from us? Right. And that's what we're doing. We're protecting the rest of the world from attacks from SARS, if that makes sense. And sorry to pick on SARS.
No, and look, it's a good example because I mean they addressed it early, and I think there's 2 points that you raised there. It's one, there's the responsibility that you have as an organization for your own ecosystem of stakeholders that you need to protect. But at the same time, the other risk element is that like who's going to be held responsible and accountable for this as a customer? They're not going to blame the hacker or the fraudulent person or the cyber criminal. They're going to blame SARS for like, why weren't you on top of this and why didn't you handle this and why was I now a victim of this? And that's usually how the rhetoric will go. And so the importance as an organization is not just doing the right thing to protect them, but you got to protect yourself because this can really blow up from a risk perspective. So that never existed before DMARC, eh?
You could not solve this problem. It was unsolvable.
Sure.
So DMARC started becoming popular about 5 years ago because Google adopted it and Google said that this is important. Then Microsoft started implementing it. Lots of security companies. So it only started taking hold about 5 years ago. And it only became possible about 5 years ago to stop a cyber criminal sending a mail from you to people outside of your network. So that's what we solved. But yeah, I think it's like we can get into the technicalities of it, but there's still so much work for us to do. I think we're a sizable organization, but if we look at the opportunity in front of us, there are 85 million organizations just in English-speaking markets that have to do this. That is too much work for 100 Sendmarcs, right? So, and I think that comes back to the statement you said about competition. A lot of entrepreneurs are afraid of the competition. Sometimes the market is too big for you and your competitors and 10 more, right? And there is, if you just do something that you're good at, and the market is big enough, if you're in the game for long enough, you will be successful. And we're pretty confident about that. There's an interesting story which I tell in the early days of Sendmarc. There's something funny about being an entrepreneur. When you start a company, the first year is you just got to completely fake it and try and recruit great people, right? And when you're recruiting those great people, you're just spinning some sort of story to try and get them to fall in love with you and your idea so that they can come work for you, right? So that's what we had to do for the first year. We had to go and recruit great people. And in about 1.5 years, I remember sitting on a call with our whole company, and I was feeling very vulnerable. And it was like a morning call, and I admitted to the whole company, I think this might just work. Like this business we started.
Excuse me, what? I thought you a year and a half ago since I started this, so that was the point, that you thought this was going to work.
Yeah, that was it. So like you can imagine these poor people, their mouths dropped on the call, and I said, I think this is going to work, right? So 6 months later, they bought me a T-shirt for my birthday that says, this might just work. And it's like a saying we use at Sendmarc a lot. It says, this might just work. And the truth is now I know this is going to work. And there's a point in every entrepreneur's life where you know your idea is going to work. But now what I'm afraid of is, are we the people that can take this opportunity and make it the greatest that it can be? And that's weird, right? That's aspirational fear versus failure fear. And I've always found as an entrepreneur, aspirational fear is significantly more frightening than failure fear. I'm totally cool with failing, but I'm petrified of not reaching my potential as a human.
Yeah, and on that exact note, I actually had a call with an existing client right before hitting record on this, and we had a conversation of, I can see where this can go, but I don't know if I should exit because I don't know if I'm the right person to take it there. And we got into the conversation. I'm definitely going to call him back later to really unpack this, but and do that. But it's that fear of, I can see, because I mean they're booked out in terms of pipeline till April, right? It's like, so they're not struggling from a sales perspective, and it's just how do we take this further? And it's just that daunting nature of, can I do this? Can I ride this bucking bronco? But anyway, without going there, I think that I really wanted to get enough into the technicality to understand what the opportunity was, because you keep using the word opportunity, and we all know the saying of success is where opportunity and preparation meet. And it seems like it was the perfect timing, because DMARC was coming around for a while, obviously in terms of conceptualization for quite a long time. Hit the market, like you said, 5 years ago, is like, this can actually be done. Started getting popularized by the biggest, tech giants in the world. And so now it was like, okay, well, this can happen, this can work, but and it was just early to market, and that's how you get the opportunities. The preparation came from the fact that you knew about this when no one else really did, and you took the leap to be able to build a business on it. So what I want to understand before we now get into the actual growth is, how did you know about this to begin with when no one really did?
Yeah, so let's just, I want to just correct you there, because I actually think we were a bit late, right?
Okay.
Which is interesting, and we're still successful, right? So that's what's
well, even as you say, it's like there's still the market can't be served by 100 more of you. So
yeah, and we were a bit late because it took me longer to leave the job that I was in. And while I was in that job, you can't go and be building other businesses on the side, right? It's just unethical and illegal. So it took me a bit of time to be able to exit that properly. So come back to your question. What was your question?
So it was around the opportunity and preparation meeting, and the fact is, like, how did you know about DMARC before it really got popularized in the market? I mean, for example, I found out about it now, right? So having met you, but this is something that every organization needs. And the fact that it's like, how did you know about this when, I guess, Google and Microsoft were still finding out about it before implementing it, and you were baking this idea in the backs of your minds?
Yeah, the previous business I built was an email marketing business, right? So that was a business which sent hundreds of millions of emails a year. An incredible business, a business that I'm very proud of. I was proud to be part of, all of that sort of stuff. And the people who understand all the protocols and technicalities of sending mail very well, or better than most, are email marketing companies. So like some popular email marketing companies that people know people like MailChimp or Campaign Monitor or ExactTarget, those types of things. In South Africa, the business that I was involved in was Everlytic. So we could, like, us as senders, we were understanding it, and the mail we were sending was DMARC compliant. The problem is we could see all the email receivers didn't understand it. So in my previous business, I was involved in sending mail, and trying to get mail into inboxes, and that's how I understood DMARC. Technically, Sendmarc is quite different. Sendmarc worries about receiving mail, right, and stopping bad actors, right? So it's almost like an email security company versus an email marketing company. But I learned all about email security protocols and the technical boring stuff in that business. And that was where we started to see the stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. And I think that also really grounds the story and the success that you've been able to generate in 4.5 years, because like a lot of people look at that and like, well, what is it that made you successful in such a short frame of time? Even though compared to your aspirations, you proclaim that you still have such a long way to go, but hitting, thousands of customers, hundreds of partners all over the world, 70 people, 4.5 years, like that's incredible work. And the point there is, it's that you understood this. You were in such a good position to have such solid expertise on the problem that building a solution for it is really not hard when you're in such a niche position to begin with. And I say that and frame that because the number of early stage founders I also engage with that have got this idea of something that they want to build, but they've got absolutely no expertise in that market, in that competitive landscape, in even that product that they're trying to build, that they end up building the wrong thing.
Yeah, so I want to touch on that because it's important, because I sometimes think that, well, I don't think about it, I know. I think a lot of entrepreneurs think that you have to build it first, and then they will come. I don't believe that at all, right? So when I think about the success of Sendmarc, it's very much, we're successful because we built a great product, and we're successful because we sold it like crazy, right?
So, okay, fair enough.
And and the reason we're successful is because I had much more appreciation for the need for sales now that I'm a bit older and more experienced, right? So the yin and yang of, if you build it, you also have to sell it, is something which I think we have to pay a lot of respect to.
And thank you. That's the point I was also trying to raise, is just around that word need, is because around the the experience that you had, you understood the need so well. So the conviction around sales just doesn't become hard, because you're not trying to sell someone a product, right? It's like, I know you need this. Let me just see how educated you are in the situation, then kind of take you down that pipeline. So basically, what I'm trying to get into is, what were the early stage sales like? You understand the need in the market. You understand that desperately.
I want to touch on something which I think, if you're starting a business or an entrepreneur, like, I've always felt there's two great times to start a business. The one is when you're still living at home with your parents, right? Because you can take any risk you like and you can still eat dinner, right? That's like super important. And you also have this hunger and this fear of it, and like, it's just great. It's a great time to start a company. The problem with that time is you have no experience, right? So everything that you do could be completely wrong. Okay, but cool. But you're still living at home with your parents and you get to eat dinner every night. So great time to start a company. The second amazing time to start a company is when, I'd say, in your late 30s, right? And often when you're in your late 30s, you have 15 to 20 years experience, you have a family. So the beauty of that phase is in your life is, you're young enough to still have energy. You have great experience. So when you're doing things, you're doing less things wrong, right?
Mm.
And you have a family which is kicking your ass to get out of bed every day and go and earn some money, right? So that's just like, all of those things together creates pressure and experience. And the result of that is you're incredibly driven, but you make less mistakes in your late 30s, right? And it's just from your experience. So two great times to start a business. So coming back to your story about startups and all of those sorts of things, the reason I appreciate the yin and yang of sales and product, it's through experience. I know that if you're not going to sell it and no one's going to buy it, you ain't got nothing. And if you're not going to build it so that somebody can sell it, you ain't got nothing, right? So like, those two things have to fit together. And I don't think enough entrepreneurs appreciate that. They build this thing thinking that somebody else will buy it, and they don't come. They don't come to buy it. And entrepreneurs, we got to be careful not to be in love with our own bullshit, right? If nobody's buying our stuff, it means no one cares. And there's two reasons no one cares. It's a bad idea, or we're not telling the right people. One of those two things.
Exactly. But then I boil that down to the point of, it's like, do you then truly understand the need that's out there in the world that you're fulfilling? Because if you truly understand the need, then a lot of people, I think the reason why they don't get into sales is either a fear of rejection, or not knowing who to talk to. Because the point there is, it's like, it's I'm worried that people are going to reject my idea, my product, what it is that I'm doing. But the element for me is that if you are solving a real need, that self-consciousness and fear of rejection kind of gets removed, because the point is just like, I know this need needs to be met, and I'm understanding you and how we can then fulfill that and then iterate off of that. And speaking to that, but now I want to really pivot into the point of growth. Otherwise, I could get really deep into the psychology of rejection sensitivity. But kicking off in terms of that growth, success, preparation, and opportunity meet. You were so prepared in terms of having all this experience in the email marketing realm. The opportunity was, Sendmarc was just essentially coming to market. I think the only thing that could have essentially made it better is if you were able to exit your previous business a bit earlier. Like, that's the only difference. Otherwise, the timing was there as well. So you kicked this off. What I want to understand is a bit about your thinking, right? You mentioned the fact that it's like, do we cut the legs off, just keep this very small, very lean? Or do we really take this and, as you say, ride the bucking bronco? What was that kind of point where you said, let's do this, and let's take this and see how far it can go?
I think the point was when we tried to sell it to more than 10 friends or more than 20 friends, and 7 of them started buying. Right? It was like a sales validation. Like, if you think about the early phases of a business, like, you need to be able to sell to your friends and family, because they are the kindest ones to you. They almost will spend money with you because they love you. And if those guys are not even buying your product, then you got probably a problem, right? So when we had a high penetration of friends and family going with us, that was when we knew that this would start to work. The second phase is you got to start selling to partial strangers or to network or things like that. And then you've got to start selling to total strangers, people who you have no credibility with. And you've got to hit milestones in each of those phases. So we're in the phase of selling to total strangers. And that's the hardest part about getting a business to scale. Like it's first friends and family, then it's network, expanded network, total strangers. And you can only really build a global business if you can sell to total strangers. Right.
So we all know about the friends, family, and fools in the beginning, because I think what you say is very valid.
Friends,
it's
family,
like if they're not
fools, I
going to
love
buy,
that.
then they're not really going to go much further. But what's interesting, you point out the fact that there's clear milestones that you reach in that point to getting to total strangers. So just talk to me what you mean by those milestones.
Well, like if you think about the phases of sales, right? And I think the phase of sales, you've got to have the product to support your sales. So let's remember the yin and yang of product versus sales. The phases of sales is friends, family, fools. Then it's like your network. So, and then it's the extended network, like referrals, those people passing you on to other people. And then it's total strangers. If you're not getting reasonable traction in any of those, you have to solve that problem or quit, right? So, yeah. Does that answer the question, you feel?
Yeah, no, that does. I'd say where Metavolve is now is at the point of extended network and referrals. And it's the fact that that's running, it's still getting the point of learning to sell to total strangers that we're in a position for. So I definitely resonate with what you've shared.
I want to just come in there. I think some business will never sell to total strangers. So I don't know. So like it's unusual for an attorney to not be an extended network referral, right, if that makes sense. Yeah.
No, so look, I agree. In terms of the nature of what we do, it's more about the fact that let's say we're marketing and advertising to total strangers, building out some kind of trust in terms of what they're being able to see from us, hearing from the right people that we can be trusted, and then meeting us in some way or another to build some form of trust and relationship and taking it from there. I think that's it's accessing those total strangers is the point there. But I think what you're also referring to is that the total strangers are. I've got nothing to do with you now as the founders. And this is where I was going to segue. The point is that it seems like from you were handling a lot of the sales in the beginning, right? Where you were driving that front-facing element. Now, the other assumptions I have is that you've got a sales team in place, right? That's able to do that. So talk to me how you started. I want to go through the details of you stepping over that gap of really entering the market of total strangers and how you started to how you solved that problem and then how you grew.
Yeah, so the early parts of our business, the founders were the top salespeople.
Yeah.
So like my co-founder and I, we sold more than anybody. Yeah, as it should be. And any founder who thinks they shouldn't be in sales, you're not going to be as successful as you weren't, right? It's like you need a group of founders, one of them responsible for sales, the other one's responsible for product. You need that. But then what happened is we had an approach at Sendmarc is we hired leaders first. So our first salesperson was actually the sales leader, right? And we told him, it was an amazing gentleman, Jason Russ, like we had a chat with Jay, multiple lunches, and we said to Jay, listen, Jay, we want you to run a team and lead a team, but you've got to sell in the beginning. You got to carry logs to the fire. And he was like, I'm up for it. Jason's like very much a guy that doesn't mind carrying logs to the fire, but he's also a phenomenal leader. And the best of leaders, they lead by example, in my opinion. They don't manage through Excel. And Jason's that type of guy. So he started selling. We sold together. We started getting more traction. He learned about the product. And then he started hiring his team. Right. And the beauty about hiring the leaders first is when they hire their team that they can manage. What happens in a lot of startups is you hire all these sort of entry-level people, and then you hire a manager on top of them. And that manager comes and looks at these poor people and go, I don't like any of these people, but now I've got to fix this mess that you created for me. And that happens all the time, right? So we said, let's hire leadership first in all of our areas, and those leadership people will build their own teams. And that's been incredibly good for us. The problem is it was very expensive to hire people like Jason Russ. I mean, he's a phenomenal guy, lots of experience. So the next question is, where do you get that money from? How do you fund to hire A-grade people?
So before we get there, because I know what the answer to that is, but what I want to get into is the detail of how you developed, trained up, and skilled up your first true salesperson outside of the founders, to the point that you could trust them with that? So I know for a lot of founders, that's a first kind of bit of the gauntlet that you really need to cross in order to really scale, because that's such an important part of your business to be able to hand over to someone else. So can you just take me through almost the step-by-step process and what the plan was to really upskill them to the point that you could hand over?
Yeah, so some of the things which are super important at Sendmarc is building process. So while I was in sales, doing loads of sales, I was also developing the process. So we have like a journey from meeting a customer all the way to signing a customer, which has multiple steps in between. And it has multiple templates available for it. So I built that process with all the collateral and all the content around that, and then tested it over 6 months to a year. And then once I was happy with the process, then I was happy to start bringing in salespeople. Because I think it's quite unfair to give some guy who doesn't have nearly as much experience as a founder in how to sell their product and say to them, hey, just go sell. You need to actually be able to give them a process, collateral, content. And I'm not saying like a word for word script, but like they need to know how to tell your story, right? Because you have to have told your story 1,000 times. Yeah, so I had done probably 1,000 meetings by then, and I had all this processing collateral generated. And once we had that right, then we could start building a sales team. If you don't have that right, don't hire salespeople. It's just unfair. Expect them to phone up, pick up the dialer or whatever, and phone and talk about what? It doesn't work, right?
I think what you pointed out there that's obvious to you, but I think not necessarily obvious to a lot of founders, is that they don't do the boring stuff, right? And what I mean by that is that they might be the sales front end of the business. They love doing it and they're able to do that well, but they've never actually documented it. They've never documented, what is it that I say? Who are the people that I'm targeting? What's the process that I go through? What works? What doesn't work at this situation? How is it that you provide clarifying questions? What are usually FAQs that pop up? What is some extra sales collateral? How do you nurture? How do I nurture them? It becomes this point of they've just learned how to do it themselves. And then you get this radical sales dependence on this person because they've never written it down. And from what you're saying, that I love to make the implicit explicit, but it's just like, just write it down from the get-go. As you're figuring out even yourself, learn it, practice it, because then once you've built it out, not only are you iterating and deliberately practicing your own approach so much, but by the point of when you want to build out the sales team, it's not just them having to come and now shadow you and figuring out how it's done, is you can actually train them because you've got all the material to do so.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of founders think that writing it down is hard, but there's multiple versions of writing it down. So, for example, our sales presentation, each of the slides has notes about the story you should tell here so that you can read it and understand it. You know, we have videos done by me of the various decks that we have, how we tell that story, what's going on, that any salesperson can just log in and watch at any point in time, right? Just to get a refresher. And yeah, so writing it down is one thing, but there's so many other ways. You know, put some footnotes into your presentations, create videos of yourself doing the pitch so that other people can watch it and learn how you do it. Doesn't have to always be written down, but it's got to be available for somebody else to consume without you being in front of them. You know, and I think that's what you're saying, Cameron, right? Yeah, exactly right.
It's just got to be that simple. And the point there is, like, if you are the kind of person that doesn't like documenting things and writing down process, just get an AI note taker and recorder to kind of do it for you, and then you can pass it on to the next person. So, all right. So now we're starting to really build the sales function, because the point is, it's like we can talk about growth, but you don't get growth without sales, right? So that's the kind of obvious point. And I think what I love is that not only did you unlock this founder's trap early, and especially on the sales side of it, you're able to put fuel and fire into the engine of how is it that you can grow. I said, obviously, in terms of how, like, I knew the answer in terms of being able to, how do you afford to pay someone's salary that's so expensive from the get-go. But I think, again, maybe let's bring that back and actually tell that story. So how did you manage to do that? Let's pause here for a moment. If you've made it this far into the episode, it's probably because we're talking about things that you're trying to implement in your business. You found your sweet spot in the market, you've gained momentum, and you've already been through a phase of growth. Because of this, you know that on the outside, growth is super sexy. but on the inside, it's incredibly difficult to achieve and to sustain. So now I've got a question for you. Now that you know the sacrifices it takes to achieve growth, how much time are you currently spending thinking about your direction and your next phase of growth? I bet not as much as you'd like, because you're still in the thick of it. Leading, deciding, pushing for performance, pursuing new opportunities, maybe even thinking about selling the business. See, your story is yours. But this chapter where growth meets complexity, this is when things get hard. Because you can listen to insights from podcasts and stories from people that have been there before, but applying it to your context is a completely different ballgame. So let me help you. If you want to have a 90-minute, no strings attached conversation with me, then head over to Metavolve's website in the description of this podcast below and let me help you navigate this next phase of growth. Because at the end of the day, building a great business is complex, but it doesn't have to be complicated.
I think it's very difficult to hire great people in a startup in the early days unless you don't raise funding. Whether or not it's some sort of seed funding, Series A, Series B. If you're in the 35 and up bracket, you can't hire those people without paying them well, right? That's very important. So I actually encourage most startups to try and raise funding. And there is a couple of good reasons you should try and do it. The one is you get to hire great people. I mean, that's obvious, right? But the second one is you get to pitch your business to VCs and investors and a whole bunch of people that have seen loads of business, and you get validation or rejection. And both of those things are good outcomes. If you go pitch to 10 VCs and every single one of them says, nah, I don't like this, it's probably not a great business, right? So, because VCs or seed round funders, those are the risk takers. Those are the guys that just believe in the team, right? If you can't convince one of those to show any sort of interest, you got to change your story. So I think there are such good things to do. So pitch to VCs. The people who invested in us in our seed round was Calon and Clive. And I remember phoning up Clive and saying to him, listen, Clive, like, I'm not really interested in raising money now, but can I come and just get some advice from you about if I want to raise money, what do we need to do? And Clive said to me, he said, you're running the trick on me, which is if you ask me for advice, I'll invest in you. Whereas if you ask me for money, I'll give you advice. That's what Clive said to me. And I said to him, yeah, I suppose I am asking you for advice so that you will invest in me. Yeah, so he pulled a joke on me. Does that make sense? Sorry, that was a bit of a tongue twist.
No, that made perfect sense, and I love the awareness from you and Clive about doing exactly that. But it's just one of those small, and it's a small thing there as well that I find again with so many startup founders as well. They think that they're going to raise their investment through a pitch. They're not. They're going to raise their investment through the relationship and the conversations that they're able to develop with investors. The pitch is very necessary to be able to communicate what's happening in a very short amount of time so that they can evaluate it. But that how you actually raise funding and get your investor is building a relationship and chatting to them first.
Yeah, pitching is step 8, step 9. Just speak to VCs and ask them for advice about how do you prepare your business so that it's VC friendly and develop that relationship, right? I've always think that that's just so important because those guys, there is nobody that won't take a call and give you advice. It's very unusual. But if you tell them that you want to pitch your business to them, they'll check their diary and see if you've got a slot available in November, right?
Yeah,
I'll see where that goes.
Exactly. So where we're at in the story right now is that you've hired Jason, you've developed him as your key salesperson. I mean, you skipped a couple of steps and said like he started hiring his own sales team, and I definitely want to get there. But what I want to understand from you is that what did you start doing more of now that you're doing less of sales? So now that you handed this over to him, was it a dual effort and you were both handling sales, and how did your role and attention change at that time?
Yeah, this is a super interesting question, which I actually still don't have an answer to. Like, what should a CEO or a founder be doing as the business gets larger? I think that's an interesting question, right? Which I still don't know the answer to. If I describe what I do these days, every single thing that I have to do it means a very skilled company hasn't been able to find an answer to. So usually when something ends up on my desk, it's the great company or employees that we haven't been able to solve that problem. So it's mostly the hardest stuff.
So you're the ultimate problem solver.
I think I just fill gaps or help them make decisions on topics that they don't have surety on. Because there's something about being the founder or the CEO of an organization is that there are some decisions which you have to take responsibility for because it could cripple the business or go wrong or something like that. And the buck has to stop with you, right? You can't force those types of decisions. And those are a lot of the things that I get involved in now. And they're quite painful or frustrating, but those are the sorts of things I get involved in. I'm mostly just a facilitator, to be honest.
Sure. So you sound like someone who's I want to say naturally orientated towards leadership, but I'm sure that you would also correct, because you're quite a humble person. So you'd naturally correct me of the fact that it's actually just lessons learned throughout experience, and like I'm still winging it, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know if humility is a weird thing. I think that I don't know what the answer to that question is. I think good leaders are people that you believe in. And we believe in people that are relatable, and people that are relatable are comfortable in their failure and their success. And if they're not comfortable in both sectors, they become unrelatable, right? So yeah, that's what I feel about good leadership. I think about some of the best leaders I've ever experienced in my life, and it was people that I believed, people that were honest, right? And they were comfortable in failure and success. Those are just good lessons for me.
100%. And I totally agree. So, Sam, there's now talking about the growth journey, right? There's the couple points that I raised again offline that I want to get into is how you're growing the product, growing internationally, and growing through partnerships. Where I'm again making another assumption that I obviously want you to correct is that now that you've built that you've trained Jason and he's up and running with sales. My key assumption there is that he's going to be focused more on like the direct to customer sales. So going to these organizations and going and selling them. My assumption is that what that's freed you up to do is now go through more the partnership model and seeking that to build out partnerships with people where you can plug into their value proposition, their competitive advantage, their value chain, whatever it might be. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is but besides that assumption is, well, one, is that true? And then two, how did you go about developing the partnership approach towards your sales?
Yes, I think the correct title for Jason is CRO, which is Chief Revenue Officer, which, so he's got to think about how does the business sell. And there are, in tech or in cybersecurity specifically, there are two markets. There's direct, which it does well. And then there's also through channel. So just a simple example, if you think of most organizations that have more than 25 employees will outsource their technical support to some managed service provider. And they'll buy their Microsoft licenses from there, they'll buy their computers from there, their printers, all of that stuff. They'll buy from that managed service provider because they don't want to hire any sort of internal IT resources. So if you want to get your cybersecurity product to that customer, you've actually got to sell to their managed service provider or MSP, because that MSP is the trusted influencer and also are making the decisions about what sort of tech or cybersecurity their customers need. So we knew that from the beginning. So from the beginning, we knew we would have to sell through channel. But in the first year and a half of our business, why would any MSP or any channel give us any credibility? Who the hell are we? Right. So we had to go and put some logos on the board to show that we could do this. So the first year and a half, we sold direct as hard as possible. And then channel would start to take us seriously. And now most of our sales come through channel or MSPs. But I find MSP sales are hard, right? It's they have so many OEMs just like us trying to get their attention, and they're trying to worry about their customers. So when you're selling through channel or managed service providers, you really have to work very hard at trying to make sure that you're solving a problem that the MSP wants to solve. Right? If you're not solving a problem they want to solve, you'll just fall to the back of the queue. Right? Doesn't matter how many pizzas or donuts you send them or anything like that. It's just like, why should they care?
I look, I totally agree, and the same things happened for Metavolve, where what we've done to this point is working directly with founders and getting them to buy from us directly and go through the program. Because what we found out now is now with that trust, that credibility, and quantified results from selling something that's very intangible, and that's strategy. So now that we've got the results to do that, now we're going to the accelerators, the incubators, the VCs, private equity firms to show not only do we have the results, it's like, do you have companies in your portfolio that aren't growing? Cool, we can help with that. Right, we've got the actual exact results of doing that, but we could never have done it the other way around. And I think the same point goes for you. So it was that it seemed that there was the intentionality from the beginning that you knew that that's where you had to go. You had to build out some kind of proof that you are who you say you are and you can do what you say you can do, and then you took it from there. I just want to unpack this because, I mean, we're obviously talking about these different points around sales as if it's linear and you're doing one thing at a time. I know it's definitely not that. So just like help me paint the picture for myself and obviously the audience of where's this business at now that you've started really unlocking some of these partner sales. You've got the direct to business sales going. What's in terms of size, in terms of reach, in terms of like how many geographies you're in, because we haven't even spoken about the international one, but where's the business at now in the story?
Yeah, so now most of our revenue comes from channel sales. We're in 5 different markets. And I'm still not sure if that's the right thing to do, right? So maybe what I would say is like we're in channel sales. We do have a direct sales team. And every single direct deal that we do, we try and reverse it through the channel. So we'll ask the customer in that way, who's your channel partner? And we'll reverse that deal into the partner, and we'll give the partner margin on that deal, even though that we sourced it. And we pay a lot of respect to our channel. And we're trying to work with OEMs. There's lots of very interesting things going on, and I still don't know which the right way is. Direct, MSPs, channel, OEMs. We have offices in South America, North America, Australia. I think we have offices in too many places. And we're just trying a whole bunch of stuff at the moment. It's because, remember, we're in that phase which I spoke about earlier. We're selling to strangers. And we have to work out what's the best way to sell to strangers. Yeah, and we're still trying to understand that. We're doing well, but I think we should be doing better.
Okay, so just on that, because I've got loads of questions to follow that up on. But when you say doing well, but could be doing better, what does that look like for you? So you've got not just one source of channel partners that you've identified. You've got multiple ones that you can look at. So you've got the direct to customer, and you're doing everything from small businesses all the way through to enterprise. So when you're talking about what could be better, what's the point of what are you looking for? We can turn around and be like, okay, let's just let those keep running, but now we're going to invest our time and attention into this one thing.
Yeah, there's a way in which all businesses measure their success, and that's, are we hitting budget? That's like, are we hitting the targets which we set for ourselves? And the messed up thing about targets is it's some sort of imaginary number that you built in Excel to project what the future will look like, which nobody knows that exists, right?
Yeah.
So we're not hitting or exceeding our targets by what we think is possible. But we're still growing incredibly well. That's what's so messed up about this whole thing. You have this imaginary thing in an Excel sheet which you hold yourself to account to, yet you're totally kicking ass and growing faster than you ever could have dreamed of, yet you're frustrated with yourself. I mean, it's like a totally messed up situation.
So, look, on that exact note, this is the way that in terms of strategic growth, the way that we view it and do it is more it's around what is the vision and future state you want your business to look like, and then just work backwards in terms of a list of logical dependencies of what needs to happen in order to get there. And then the point is, how much are we moving towards the business that we want to build and what needs to be done? And that's a better picture for strategic growth for me in terms of then hitting the targets. And then the targets are the point is, okay, what position do we need to be in order for that to be realized? But without going down a methodological approach, because I agree with you with the imagined target and doing that versus, well, we want to be a bit more sustainable as a business with a culture that has transcended the leadership into the next management layer. What do we need to do for that to happen? And that's a picture of logic and actual strategy rather than, well, this is the budget and the target and what do we need to do to get that? And for the record, I'm not discounting budgets. They're very necessary in terms of what we need to be able to do to drive the finances and the growth of the business. But it's around the element of strategy and what we are now building as a sustainable organization, those get confused instead of being complementary to one another.
Yeah, I think that one of the things I am very proud of is strategic objectives. We're hitting them, every single one, right? Culture-wise, we're incredibly strong. Well, I believe we are. I could just be drinking my own Kool-Aid. So, like, we have like strategic objectives analysis on a weekly basis, and we're on track with most of them. And we're running all of those types of things. I think you sometimes have to ask yourself, like, how is that strategic objective contributing towards like something which is going to result in affecting my top line, right? Because if it's not affecting that in some indirect way, let's just have more lunch, right? It's super interesting sort of debate or philosophical discussion.
Yeah, interesting point, because for my assumption, because where my thinking goes is bottom line orientated, because a lot about the way we view growth is twofold. So when I talk about building a sustainable business, it's usually about these efficiencies that this thing can run into perpetuity, and it's around the bottom line that you're building in the internal environment to ensure that it can be more profitable. Obviously, the top line is that, and that's the difference for me between a growth strategy and strategic objectives, and that's why they can work in tandem. I could flesh this out in more detail in terms of how we actually go about bringing those elements together. But this isn't a Metavolve plug. Back onto Sendmarc, Sam. So right, so we spoke very briefly, and we gave the points of the fact that you've got offices everywhere, and you think that you've got too many. I'm assuming a lot of people listening to this are like, well, how the hell did you do that in the first place? And grow internationally, and the fact that you're sitting there in all these geographies. I mean, you mentioned South Africa, South America, you've got North America as well, you've got Amsterdam and Australia. That's where you've got like permanent feet on the ground.
Yeah, people on our payroll.
Yeah, so I just want to know from the get-go. I mean, so this started off in South Africa. I mean, the business is registered in Delaware. What was the like first real geographic expansion? Where actually, maybe even a step back, what was the first core market you actually started working in? And then where did you decide was the next place that required us to focus some real boots on the ground in order to grow in that market?
So there's a question for, like, are South African businesses going to expand outside of its borders, right? And sometimes that question gets answered for you. So in many situations, if you raise funding, they want to know your international growth strategy. That's it. And if you don't have one, you're going to have to find one, right? Because like when you get to certain sorts of sizes, you can only get investors outside of South Africa. So that's why I said sometimes those questions get asked. So when this bucking bronco started running and we started being able to raise money, we also had to think of an international growth strategy. That just became part and parcel. So then the question was, where did we go first? The two places we went to first was Europe, so sort of Amsterdam and South America. South America was just because we had some friends there who were willing to work for free for a period of time and see how it went. And they did very well, right? They were just like testing this for me. And then Amsterdam was one of our co-founders said, look, I'll go run Amsterdam. And I want to go live in Europe for a few years, and I'm happy to go live in Amsterdam, so I'll go run it. So it wasn't like we decided to go to Amsterdam. I think strategically we probably should have gone to the UK first. And I think this is very important. Like South Africans, we speak English and many sort of other local languages, but the language that we speak, which is exportable, is English, right? So it's easiest to go to other English markets. There's enough difference between people from the UK and South Africans and Australians in the UK, and we all speak the same language, but we're different. And now you want to understand like how hard it is to do business in Germany or Spain or Italy, even Holland, right? There's just like a cultural gap that I don't think is worth it when the English markets are just so big, right? So I think we should have gone to the UK first in hindsight, but we're learning and we're making mistakes, and we're getting things right.
But I get you, and I think but this also speaks to the story as the fact that we're still human beings as well at the end of the day, right? And so as entrepreneurs, we have our personal lives and our goals that we want to achieve in the way that we want to live. And the point there is, it's like whenever formulating a strategy for a business, I think when when you overemphasize one over the other, right? If you're trying to, like, the founder's goals supersede that of the business, or the business supersedes that of the founder, you either have a problem where it's growing in the wrong direction and focusing on the wrong things, or you actually like hamstringing the motivation of the founder in the first place in terms of what they're trying to build. So yes, logically in hindsight, I agree with you that going into the UK is probably the most logical decision. But at the end of the day, your co-founder was like, I want to move to Amsterdam anyway. I want to live in Holland, and we might as well use this opportunity to expand this market into Europe. And I think what's also fantastic about the European market for many businesses, even myself, like with Metavolve, we worked with clients in 15 different countries. And the point is they've all been in this with plus minus 3 hour different time zone, because we can operate in a virtual environment. And that wouldn't have been possible before COVID. But with you being a tech business, is that you could essentially do the same thing. So although you can have a presence in Amsterdam, your core team can still be in South Africa and service this wide array, because it's still in similar time zones. But I think before getting into the practicality operationally of that, the fact that you do agree that it's such a different market, different language in the UK, what are the lessons you had to learn and the mistakes that you made in accessing the Holland market, and how you managed to start unlocking that?
Yeah, I still don't think we're doing well in Netherlands or Holland, right? So
Okay.
I think we're still trying to work that out. We're actually doing fairly well in the UK, and we tried in Holland for 2 years, and in certain parts of Europe. So, but just now we're experimenting in UK, and that's actually going quite well. So I don't think I have learnings about how to be successful in Holland or the Netherlands, right? Because we just mostly failed.
Well, then talk to me about the lessons about how to not be successful in the Netherlands or in like the rest of Europe. So I mean, you've been doing this for 2 years, hasn't really worked. Like, what have you learned in that process?
I think that's an answer that we're still trying to find out what works very well. We have green shoots popping up everywhere, right? So, like, we've had 2 attempts in the US, for example, and the first one didn't go at all well, right? So, for example, I think in the US, I would hire fewer people and more senior in the US. And I think you've got to get product-led growth working pretty well, and you've got to understand your marketing engine and lead conversion and lead generation in the US before you start spending money on teams there. Like, so we just did what we did in South Africa in the US on our first attempt. We went and hired some guys and expected them to get on the phone and start doing deals. I mean, it was a disaster, So yeah, so we had to end that, and now we're starting slower in the US. And our product-led growth is working in connection with it. We've hired much more senior people who have a network, so they actually can sell to friends and family or their network. But yeah, those markets are much more mature, and you've got to get product-led growth and marketing working in those markets. Where South Africa, it's actually quite a small market. There's very few people that you can't reach through a few friends, right? I'm sure I can't reach the CEO of a major bank, but I can probably reach the CIO of a few divisions in multiple financial institutions through my network, right? And it's because it's a fairly small market. But it's not like that in Europe or the US or other countries like that.
So, I mean, you've mentioned product-led growth here, and I've spoken to plenty of people like offline around product-led growth versus sales-led growth, and never really brought it onto the podcast. So, just for the sake of the audience, even for me and my own definitions, to just define what you mean by product-led growth and why that requires a different approach to what you're used to doing in South Africa.
So I don't know if my definition is correct, but I'll just go with my definition. Product-led growth is when a user purchases your product without engaging with some sort of sales pitch. So that's clicked on an ad somewhere, signed up on your website, swiped their credit card and started using your product through some sort of lead nurturing and lead converting strategy. I consider that as product-led growth. Sales-led growth is when you've got some real people that are setting up meetings, pitching to customers and getting them to buy, right? So, yeah, that's what I consider the difference.
Perfect. And just on that, why do you think product-led growth is the right approach for the US, given the fact that you said the sales-led growth didn't work?
I think you need both. So the thing about the US is very expensive, right, to hire people there. It's 3 to 4 times what we pay in South Africa. So you need a source of leads, which often comes from product-led growth, to facilitate offsetting the cost of those people, right? Because you need those salespeople in those regions. So if you want to pull all of the sales metrics and cost analysis of, you need product-led growth to facilitate the lead generation process as well for those people. Yeah. Just because of the cost of expanding into first world markets or developed markets.
Okay, so the point is, it's just there isn't enough pipeline for you to be able to see this person hitting the results and the targets that they need to just break even, let alone start making the business a profit in that market.
Yeah, so here's a simple thing, right? So let's say a South African person gets paid 10. A South African person gets paid 10, a US person might get paid 30. But you're still selling the same thing, which might sell at 1. So now the US people has to sell 3 times more deals than the South African person to cover their costs, right? Which might be physically impossible, right? I mean, they can't make 3 times more calls or have 3 times more meetings.
Sure. Well, the next question I just have is, why not just change your pricing for the US market then?
You can, but you can't 3x it.
Sure.
I mean, you can maybe 15, 20% it, or 30%, 40%, but not 3x it.
Really? Interesting. Because in my space and what we do is, like, compared to the UK market and the US market, we could easily 3x our pricing, and like we're like, look, as we are, we're not cheap. I think we're very much in value-based pricing. But if we in those markets, it's a very different ball game for the nature of what it is that we do. But it's not, this is not even comparing apples and oranges. This is comparing like seeds and dogs, in terms of the nature of businesses that we have.
Let's unpack what you're saying, because I think you're right. So I think you're selling your time to US companies. Am I correct, or is that a poor assumption?
So, I mean, look, operationally, yes, but we've changed our business model that we're a fixed price, right? So we're one price for the program, and it's on us to make it efficient as possible, because it's an outcome-based sell. It's like you come to us because you want to develop a strategy, not have a number of workshops. So it's not necessarily coaching. It's about, there's a specific endpoint you need to get to, and we fix the price according to that. But in order for us to be able to scale that, it's very human dependent in terms of time.
But it's a fixed price for time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think in the US, they understand what time costs, and time there costs 3x what it costs here. Right. And so okay. What you're charging is just, yeah. But iPhones are cheaper in the US than they are in South Africa. Right. It's the same iPhone.
So, interesting.
Yeah.
So Sam, on the topic of product-led growth, right? Obviously, I see on your website there's all these free tools that you're giving away. Now I'm putting the pieces together. Tell me about why you're giving all this free stuff away. And my intuition is telling me that with the product-led growth, you've got a couple of these tools that can really add value to a business or a potential clients that they can really unlock and then buy your products themselves. Is that true? What was the reason behind the free tools on the website, and essentially what value are they giving away?
Yeah, so the tools on our website are actually pretty amazing. I use my own tools, not because I'm loyal to our company, just because they're better than everybody else. So that's like super interesting for me. Like, there was a point in our business where our own engineers weren't using our own tools. And instead of forcing them to use our own tools, we just made our tools better. And now our own engineers use our tools, right? So we built great tools because we want to make engineers' lives easier. And then we hope that they do business with us. So it is technically a lead source or a lead generation, which results in sales. But we also just like building great stuff, which makes engineers' lives better. And we know that if we get that right, we'll get good business anyway. It's just, yeah. Engineers are pretty honest that way. If you build something great for them, they're then happy to spend money with you. It's a fairly honest transaction.
So we've now spoken about the product side of the product-led growth, but the marketing point is, how are you getting the attention out there? How are you getting the knowledge that we exist and we can solve your problems? And how are you approaching that marketing play? Because that can be an absolute sinkhole for money.
It is a sinkhole for many. I'll tell you all the things we've done. I mean, we run events. I've been at multiple expos all over the world. I ship South Africans all over the place because South Africans are actually great in rooms. We run loads of Google ads. We run loads of social media. Just endless amounts of things that we're trying to do all the time. We're still not sure what works and what doesn't, but we're trying all the time. I wish I had a silver bullet for that. I just don't. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, hopefully when you do and you figure out what the silver bullet is, we can maybe have a round 2 on the podcast. You can tell me exactly how it is that it worked. So Sam, okay, so I just want to go back to the European story, right? So the UK market's going well compared to the other ones. And the comparison there is that you said that it would be a lot easier to go to an English-speaking market, but the UK one's working quite well, but the US one isn't. And I can understand how that it would be the point of simple with language with UK versus Europe. But just unpack to me what's going specifically well in the UK that isn't translating into other regions.
Okay, so the US is actually going fairly well. We just started the US. We restarted the US later. So the UK and Europe has got probably a year ahead of the US market. So maybe that's just some context which is worth going into. But I think we've just put significantly more effort into the UK. And we also have a phenomenal distribution partner there. So that's another thing to think about. So we were talking about routes to market direct, MSPs, and distribution. So we have a great distributor in the UK who has existing relationships, and we've been working very well with them. So if you're selling tech or cybersecurity, I think you need to understand your distribution process and how do you manage distribution in markets which you don't have legs. Yeah. So that's why we've actually been very successful in the UK.
Yeah, let's unpack that a bit more because I like to get in the details here because what's intuitively obvious for me is that where does it really plug into the value chain? So you going to managed services providers makes perfect sense because if for one person within a company to have to worry about everything from email to hardware to I'm not the right person for this. I'm a psychologist, right? So I'm like anything IT related. You want to have one source.
Why should you
same
care?
thing. Yeah, so it's the point that I'm getting into. It's the equivalent of it's like I hate having so many logins. It's like, can I just have one login for one thing? That's why MSPs essentially exist. It depends on their function. And so of course there it's like plugging into that is adding into their toolbox. And this is the benefit of you being niche. But now you're talking about distributors, right? So the MSPs I can get. How do you define your distributors? What do they look like?
Yeah, so it took me a long time to understand distributors. And I think we've only started understanding distributors over the last year. So what I think distributors are, or the ones that will work for us, is they're actually an extension of your company. So the distributors that we work very well with, they have sales teams that sell our product, they have support engineers that support our product, and they take a significantly higher margin for that service. And they have hundreds, if not thousands, of MSPs that are buying stuff from them right now, today, that they can then take your product to, right? So, yeah, we're working with an amazing distributor in the UK. And they have a couple of hundred MSPs already on their books. So when they launch our product to their MSPs, they get sales traction very fast because they have a whole bunch of MSPs that are already trusted. And we're doing the same in the US at the moment. But that distributor is an extension of us. They support our product, they sell our product, they market our product, all of those types of things. And I wish I'd understood that earlier. If you get into a relationship with the right distribution partner, they become your team. Once they're your team, you're on the same team. Yeah, that's how I would describe distributors.
So again, when you're talking about these distributors, it's the fact that they are their own organization, and a huge part of their model is being a distributor of other products. And this is just my own ignorance in this space, because the only comparison I have in my mind, or best one I can think of, is probably wine. Is that if you make wine in South Africa and you make premium wine that you want to sell into an international market, there's no way you're going to necessarily do that yourself. But there are distributors that do this properly. There are these organizations, their entire reason for existing is to be international distributors into a more localized market. So they'll get all of these they'll import all of these products externally. They'll get wine from South Africa, wine from Australia, wine from wherever you name it, and then they will then go and then sell it into a local market. What does that look like specifically in terms of your space? Are they tech distributors? Are they just paint the picture for me and just help educate my ignorance.
Yeah, it's, like I said, I'm learning in this, but there are cybersecurity distributors who distribute cybersecurity products. So we had to find those distributors and get them to be interested in our product or see the opportunity, and then they will go and sell our product to their MSPs or their customers, right? So the same thing, there are wine distributors. I'm sure there are, I don't know, soft drink distributors or sweet distributors. There are cybersecurity distributors. So you gotta like understand your niche and understand who the distribution partners are for you and go work with them, right?
Yeah, and I think that also just doubles down on what's the benefit of being niche, because I think, again, with so many early stage founders, there's this fear of niching down too far because they're worried about like how much this can grow and what the potential is. But if you're not niche enough, then no distributor is going to want to use you because you do too many things, and you're now competing with like other sources of their revenue and what they're able to sell. Yeah, I think just that's super interesting that there's something that is cybersecurity distributors. Yeah,
I want to talk about that. Like, I think that's so. There's an interesting story when I left varsity. I'd been building a business during university, and I couldn't get a job when I left varsity. It was the .com crash. So for those first 7 or 8 years, we did anything legal for money, hundreds of different things. Right, so we built loads of different products. The problem was we were not really very good at anything. Right? I remember people used to ask me, "What do I do?" And I used to go, "Oh, well, where should I start?" And that is such a lame answer. I think if you're a founder of a business, you should be able to say what you do and make it relate to that person less than 30 seconds. And if you can't do that in the early stages of your business, it's too complicated. Get it simpler, right? And then when you focus on that one thing, you have the opportunity to be amazing at that thing. So at Sendmarc, I'm very proud to say we're probably one of the best DMARC companies, top 5 in the world, right? I'd like to think we're actually top 3, but maybe that'll be a bit arrogant. But yeah, we're very, very good at what we do. And it's just because we got to do it again and again and again and again and again. I'm sure I'm making a point. So any entrepreneur that's worried about the niche, you're possibly afraid of being really good or realizing it's a bad idea. Right? Those are the 2 outcomes that you will have. Both of those are great ideas. The quicker your thing fails, the better, or the quicker you become great at it, the better. Pick one.
So Sam, I think we're getting to the end of all we can fit into the story here. So just what I want to know now is what does the future look like for you? Like in the next 6 to 18 months, what does the future of Sendmarc and Sam look like?
Yes, I always get asked, like, what do I want into the distant future? A sad reality is I don't plan too far into the future. It's like we have a very strong strategic objective which goes into the future, but we try very hard to only plan 3 to 6 months into the future about what we want, even though we know where we're going. So I think the answer to the question you're looking for is like our mission as a business is we want to make the internet a safer place. And within the next 5 years, we want to protect 250,000 organizations. And we're a long way away from that. So those are the big picture thinking on what we do. But every day, I just wake up and I try to do what I did yesterday, just a little bit better. Right? That's all. And try and make it as simple as that. Because I find if you get too sort of convoluted into the future, you waste so much energy worrying about something that's so far away. Just worry about the next month and get it right and bang it on. Right? Let me just think about some of my dreams. Like, I want to build a great South African business that is internationally relevant. I just think it's like I'm a South African. I love what this country's done for me. I love some of the stupidity that we are and some of the amazingness that we are. I love the whole mix of everything. And I want to show people that it can be done from here. So that's just like a personal thing which I'm trying to achieve every day. And then I want to make a difference to like all the people that work at Sendmarc, right? I believe we work in a way which is a little bit different. So yeah, I want to prove that can be done that way. So one of the things I think about a lot at work is how do we have a happy organization? And I mean happy. That is also a high performance organization. Like a lot of people work in companies that they hate their lives. It doesn't have to be that way. You can have a happy organization that is also a high performance. Sometimes people at Sendmarc, they describe Sendmarc as a family. I think that's a big mistake, right? Like you can't fire your kids or your brother or your mom. It's just, you can't. So I like to think of us as a professional sports team. Because if you've played sport at any level, amateur or anything like that, it's weird. You'll almost die for your team. But sometimes you'll get dropped as well. And it's okay, right? I mean, that's just...
Exactly.
But it's an amazing moment for all of those sorts of things. So I want to build a company that operates like that.
So Sam, thank you very much for sharing your growth journey on the podcast. I think you've highlighted a lot of things around what it means to build out a sales team, getting that right from the beginning, sticking to your niche, growing internationally. I really appreciate the authenticity that you brought around just being honest of still figuring out as you're going. I think that everyone listening to this will relate to that immediately. So I've run out of questions to ask in terms of to get into the journey. So the only question I have left is, what's the one question that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you that you'd like to answer now?
I think the question is why did you not go work in the corporate machine? Why do you build businesses and not go get a job? I think that's an interesting question. And when I remember when I first started my company, entrepreneur was like a bit of a dirty word. It was the guys that couldn't get jobs. That was the truth. I'm a bit older than you, Cameron, but it's true. We couldn't get jobs, right? Our business had no bragging rights. My grandmother wanted to hear that I worked at one of the banks or one of the insurers or one of the medical companies. She gave no hoots about my stupid company name or anything like that. So why did we do it? And why did we carry on doing it? I think the first answer to that question is we were desperate in the beginning. No one would hire us, so we went and built something. And I think that's the most honest answer. But as I've been fortunate enough and blessed enough to have some sort of success in my life, I think the second answer is there is something so beautiful about building your own bad idea and seeing it work. It's just like how often people ask me, give me some examples of some of the important things that have happened in your life. And the two most important things that have happened in my life is I married my wife. And the second one is I got to build my own company, right? Those are two life critical events which make a difference. And in my own business, I've had the opportunity to build something which I believe in and build as great as I want it to be, and also lead in a style which I believe in, right? So it's amazing what a difference you can make in the world just in a small circle. And that's where I get most of my satisfaction now. Sometimes I don't really, what we do doesn't really matter sometimes, but it's the way we do it. We build beautiful software, we sell honestly, and we treat people good, and we deliver on what we say. And you'd be amazed at how different that is in the world. And I'm just super grateful to be able to lead with that sort of journey and that sort of style. What a great gift it is for me to just be able to operate that way. So that's why we do it now versus I was just desperate in the beginning.
Yeah, I love that. Sam, thank you so much for sharing your story. So thank you for being an authentic entrepreneur. I think the world needs more people like you as role models to show that, being true to yourself, having character, and just being honest about the process actually leads to more success. I think there's definitely still the space of fake it till you make it, exactly as you attested to with that original pitch. But I think there gets to a certain point where the honesty and authenticity gets to a lot further. So thank you for being that human being, and thank you for sharing your story on the Founder Files.
Yeah, thanks for even being mildly interested in what I had to say. It was a pleasure chatting to you, Cameron. Cheers, dude.
Thanks, Sam. So my first reflection is that channel partnerships are such an efficient way to grow revenue. But these can only work when you've proven yourself in the market and you have the traction and results for them to trust you. I've had the exact same experience with Metavolve. When I was communicating with investors in the early days and not even trying to sell to them, I received a load of skepticism about what we could do simply because we didn't have enough results yet, which, is perfectly fair. Now that we do have results though, I'm finding it far easier to unlock these conversations into opportunities. And to Sam's point, you need to know not only how you can add value to your customers and your channels partners' customers, but to the channels partners themselves as well. So for us, it's not just about helping founders grow their business sustainably so they can get their time and freedom back, but it's about understanding the struggles that investors and accelerators face in trying to grow entrepreneurial businesses too, and speaking to those, which we're learning about and starting to make some good headway in. Secondly, it's that geographic expansion is really complex and challenging. Sam even mentioned how they just replicated what they were doing in South Africa into the US, thinking that it would work, and it didn't. And there were factors related to that weren't just about the market, but things like salaries, for example, that made it a lot harder to be successful there because you can't actually just copy the same sales model and apply it there. So even for us, the thought of geographic expansion is a long way away because we don't underestimate that complexity. But in the meantime, we're going to keep working with channel partners who have the reach and grow with them, because that's much easier than trying to establish our own customer base ourselves from scratch. And we can just work with their market in their countries that they've already established themselves in. Finally, it's about giving away a lot of value for free and making sure that your product is good enough for your engineers to use themselves. So just on the second point, it's about making sure that you're so good that even the experts want it, which is a great way to differentiate your value in the market and have a lot of confidence in your products, because even the experts that are building this thing are no better than anyone else. If they're wanting to use it themselves, then you can be quite confident that what you're putting out there is great. And that's exactly what we're trying to do at Metavolve. And we're constantly doing is we're drinking our own Kool-Aid, we're taking our own medicine, walking our own talk, and we're constantly refining the product because of our own experience of what we're getting from utilizing our strategy, methodology, and executing that ourselves. Obviously, we're getting loads of feedback from our customers, but it's that element of do it yourself. And if it's not good enough for us, then should it be good enough for our customers? And the other point around giving value for free, it's the point of why we're now developing free masterclasses, so we can take what we do, break it down into smaller pieces that are easier to consume. And the way that we're doing that is to help founders unpack their market positioning, competitive advantages, and customer experience in a workshop format. Now, I have to be honest, I was originally quite hesitant to do this at first, because not only is this some of our secret sauce, but it's just a lot of value to add in a short amount of time that it made me fearful that, are they going to want to buy more? Are they actually going to engage further? But from what we've done in our pilots and testing so far, it's just also the right thing to do. And not only because it's really valuable, but it really builds trust quite quickly that doing this is worth the time and effort. So I'm excited for this journey. There's so many lessons that are going to come, and there's so many mistakes to be made, but I know it's definitely the right path to continue down. And that's it for me. Thanks for listening to another full episode of the Founder Files. Let me know what thoughts and questions you have in the comments so I can make sure we're giving you the value that you want to receive. And until next time, cheers.